We are unwell today. May was not it for me. May just didn't really deliver the goods this year. May was May. Hello, my name is Meekela. This is Meekela Reads. I live here. Typically, at the end of every month, we talk about the books that I read. However, at the conclusion of May, I read a total of 4 books, which when you think about it, like that's a book a week, and that's not a bad effort. And I would say actually that's like a pretty decent amount of books. But I normally am someone who can double that pretty easily in a month. And do you want to know why? Do you want to know why I didn't read this month? I didn't touch a camera this month. I didn't do anything. And it's because I hyperfixated on a crochet project. This one in particular. This is a bag that I have crocheted. It was a learning process. I have straps. Am I finished the project? No. Do we ever finish projects here? Also no. So if you're after a reason for this week's video being subpar, this is the reason. I will be gifting this to my darling younger sister. I have plans to finish making it at some point. I have started making myself one rather than finishing hers though. So that's where we're at. In the process of making said bag, I watched approximately 6 seasons of Grey's Anatomy. I watched from seasons 3 to 9. It was a journey, and I think that's around about where I get every single time that I watch Grey's Anatomy, because after the plane crash, everything just kind of goes downhill. So I haven't been motivated to go back. The dopamine has stopped flowing for that particular project. And so now we're back. We're back to reading. I finished a book for June already, but that's for next month's wrap up. Let's talk about the books that I read in May instead. Due to aforementioned sickness, I have no structure. I have no plan. I read 4 books. Let's talk about them in the order that I finished reading them. I've also already talked about 2 of these in a video where I read them, but we'll talk about it again, just in case you missed it. So the first book I finished at the start of May, actually, and that was Caught by Tracy Wolff. This is the 4th book in the Crave series. I started listening to the Crave series a couple of months ago, fell in love. I listened to most of them in a very short period of time because I was driving an hour to and from work every day, and so listening to audiobooks is something that I would fill my time with because I had it available. It was there. I have since moved workplaces. I no longer drive an hour to work, and thus my audiobook listening time has drastically reduced. I digress. Caught is the 4th book in the series. I can't tell you, obviously, the content because that will spoil things from previous books in the series, but we continue to explore this urban fantasy world that Tracy Wolff has just curated. I still had a good time in Caught. I think Caught was probably the last book listening to it in the series that I genuinely enjoyed listening to and was excited to listen to. We'll get to the rest in a second. But in book 3, which I finished in April, we learned a lot more about the world that we're living in, where how the magical creatures exist and coexist with humans. In this one, we learn a lot more about the lore of this world and more of the origin stories of all the creatures, I guess, in a way. But then we also just add layers on layers on layers of new magic, new people, new players in the game, all with the aim to develop an army, essentially, to fight the big bad. This one got fever dreamy quite a bit, but it was fun. It was a good ride. I rated this one technically a 3.75 out of 5 stars because I didn't enjoy it nearly as much. The romances weren't as prominent. We were getting a bit more political, and it was just a bit more focused on the plot, which is not why I'm in these books. I'm here for the characters. So that was Caught. I listened to that. Next, I finished reading The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I thought this was a thriller. However, I think it was actually just a mystery, and I was sorely disappointed because I was expecting to be scared, and I was not scared. This is the story of Hannah. She lives on like a houseboat with her husband and his teenage daughter from a previous marriage. However, at the start of the book, she gets a note delivered to her saying protect her, and her husband goes missing. And so Hannah and her husband's daughter have to go around figuring out why he's disappeared, where he's disappeared to, and uncover a lot about his past that they really didn't know about him. It was definitely easier to read than some of the books I've been reading recently, so I think that was refreshing in a way. I didn't really love the story. I just wasn't gripped by it. The story didn't keep me invested. The mystery wasn't enough to keep me invested. The overall outcome of what actually happened wasn't all that interesting, in my opinion. I think the story was well put together. The reveals and the mystery as we learn about it was quite well done. But like I said, I just didn't feel invested by the story or the people or anything in it. It's not my kind of book. I think that that's what I've learned about this, is that this type of story was not my kind of story. Give me the fantasy, vampire, werewolf, dragon romances any day. Next, we're jumping pretty far here because then it was a solid maybe 2.5 to 3 weeks before I actually touched a book again, but I finished listening to Charm, which is the 5th book in the Crave series. Wow, shock. I'm sure you're all very surprised by this. I did not know what to expect from this book, and realistically it should be book 1.5. It shouldn't be branded as book 5 because the events of this book occur between books 1 and 2. I understand why it is placed in the series where it is placed, and it's definitely necessary for the last book in the series which has just come out, but it was overall not really what I wanted it to be, and I'm sad. I'm so upset by how much I didn't like this, and I can't tell you why either without spoiling the whole series. Oh. My very non-spoilery, nondescript description of what happened in this book is that at the end of book 1, something happens to Grace. She gets frozen somehow for a certain period of time, and then at the start of book 2 she comes out of being frozen for a certain period of time. And so Charm is the events that occur between Grace being frozen and Grace being unfrozen. That's it, that's all I can tell you about it. The reason I didn't like it is because it felt really out of place, especially coming off the back of book 4. Like, I've been in this series at this point for nearly 60 hours. Like, they are not short audiobooks. I've lived a lot of the story in a very condensed period of time. I've grown with the characters. They have grown and developed. Again, we love growth and development, and it just felt like a huge step backwards going back to this point in time, because we go back to Grace still really not knowing anything about the entire world. And it was just frustrating. Like, you know when you play a video game and you die and then it takes you like way back further than you wanted to go back, and then you have to redo it all again, and you just get really frustrated because you're like, I've done this already. I've already achieved these things. I don't want to have to do it again. That's what reading this felt like. For that reason, it took me a very long time to finish listening to it. It just didn't work for me. It was not a good time. Again, very relevant for the 6th book, which has just come out, which I'm now currently listening to. The 6th book would not make sense if you didn't read 5. So unfortunately, it is a requirement for the series if you're going to continue. But at this point of where I'm at, I'm not enjoying them nearly as much as I was in books 1 and 2. So keep that in mind if you're going to go through this series. Also, they're so long. They're so long. How long have I spent listening to this series? 15 plus 18. What is with all the ambulances today? Why are people being so unsafe? 24 and a half. Oh no, this is not looking good. Oh. So at the point of finishing Charm, I have listened to this series for approximately 98 hours. No fantasy series should be this long. Anyway, moving on, because once again I did not touch the pages of a book for 4 weeks. Despite the fact that I have the book physically, I listened to it, and I listened to The Bookbinder of Jericho by Pip Williams. The reason I have both the physical copy and then also the audio copy is because I went to borrow it from the library to listen to it, but it wasn't going to be available until July, and I needed to finish this before like mid-June because I'm reading it for my workbook club. So I put it on hold anyway, just in case, and then I bought the book with the intention of reading it. However, it came in early and I had a 2-week window to listen to it, so I listened to it, I finished it, and I had a really good time. So this is a historical fiction set around 1914 at the start of the war. We follow 2 sisters, Maud and Peggy. They are twins, and they work in the bookbindery in like Oxford University bookbindery, I think. They work in the bindery at the Oxford University Press in Jericho. Reading this was a really lovely experience, but it was also a little bit emotionally confronting in a way. First of all, Pip Williams is an Australian author, which I rather appreciate. I don't read enough Australian author novels. I just don't do it. But I'm glad I did. I haven't read her other book, The Dictionary of Lost Words, and I'm pretty sure that this is a companion to that book, but I understood it all the same, so you don't really need to read them in the chronological order that they were released. But this one follows Peggy and Maud. Peggy is ambitious. She has goals. She wants to read the book. She doesn't want to bind the book. She wants to go and be a scholar. She wants to learn. She loves reading. She just has all these goals. Maud is, from what I understood, non-verbal. Her communication is purely by echoing things that other people say to her. And Peggy doesn't pursue her goals, A, because she's a woman in 1914 through to about 1918 in this book, but also because she feels like she has this responsibility to take care of her twin Maud because their mother has died before the events of the book. That was predated this. With the war, Jericho gets an influx of refugees from Belgium, and they come to work in the bindery. They just sort of integrate into life. And so we span 1914 to about 1918 in this book. And like I said, just following the stories of Maud and Peggy, particularly Peggy, in a world that is being currently ravaged by war. Pip Williams did her research for this, I will give her that. There's a really cool author's note at the end, so if you are going to read this, listen to the author's note or read the author's note at the end, because she goes into how the idea for the story came about, but then also some of the research she did and how that is integrated into the book, particularly with some of the historical accuracies of some of the books that they're binding, but also a lot of the characters that are included pay a bit of an homage to real people from this period of time. If you like historical fictions that are more so a bit of a character study rather than any particular plot or event, then you'll really, really enjoy this, I think. I've been talking for nearly half an hour about 4 books and a bag, so that's all the books that I read in May. There was only 4 of them. June is looking up, June is looking better. We're excited jumping into winter here in the Southern Hemisphere. It's going to be a good time. And I'm really hoping that I can actually finish making these 2 bags that I've started. So watch this space. But thank you for joining me on this very rambly, very unstructured video where I told you about 4 books, 2 of which you already knew about, and one of which I said I would read this month rather than last month. Wow. We're having a really good time here over in the Meekela Reads side of the world. I'm aware that I have made a few sit-down videos more recently, and it is just due to general exhaustion and then aforementioned lack of content. But I have a few exciting fun videos coming up in the next couple of weeks, so please stay tuned. They will be more vlog style, which I know that you all like a bit more, and I like doing those a bit more, so that's really exciting. So stick around. Thank you for sticking around today if you've made it this far. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night or whatever time it is where you are in the world, and I will see you next week with a vlog. Goodbye. Is this ASMR-y? Are we an ASMR channel now? Is this fine? How do you like this? I hate ASMR so much. Mouth noises, cannot stand them. Okay, I'm done here.